That's the one I have myself. Volunteer looks really nervous. Yeah, there we go. That's what's up.
The ideal position is just kind of like this.
But this is by way of sort of foundation stuff. It's by way of, because of course, these things that people know about. Yeah. Start over. We're fine. But like, no, no, no. Oh, they're not. They were like out of the street shop. That's true. Like it's good for practice. So anyways, if people are talking, that's actually right here. Either way. Anyway, lucky to have found over here at all. Yeah. All the rest is gravy. Yeah. It's like it's not five guys. offended if I put my... Really? I think it's okay, but... Just stand, y'all could just stand there as a laptop. Okay. Okay, so we're actually just about to get started, so if folks wouldn't mind taking their seats and coming over to join us. We're going to have some opening remarks and get ready to move along with the programming tonight. Wow. All right. Just file on in, find a seat. Wow, okay. We might run out of seats, but please, I don't think this is going through the whole space, but sometimes it does, but okay. All right, I see folks joining us. That's good. That's good. Cool. No, stop touching that. Stop touching it now. So I'm actually going to get us started tonight. Yeah. So let me just, thank you. Thank you for the enthusiastic response. How's everybody doing? Yeah? Woo! I can't believe this is Different Games year 4. Can you believe that? Can you believe this is year 4? Let's just give ourselves a round of applause. I'm really excited to see everyone here. How many folks have been to a Different Games before? A lot of people? That's great. All right, how many people are here for year 1? Anyone? Whoa, that's amazing. How about year 2? Year 2, anyone? I always hear most of them. Yeah, some of the time. Year 3? Yeah, and now year 4. Amazing, amazing. It's so wonderful to be here with you. There's a lot of thank yous to say. There's a lot of parties that contribute to making this conference come together. I'm here representing both the Different Games Collective, of which many members are in the audience right now and circulating around and making the event happen, as well as the Georgia Tech Digital Media Program within the Ivan Allen College of the Arts. But really the people that I want to introduce in just a moment who are going to say some words about the event are people who I feel have been amazing supporters of this event and are really the folks that make it possible for us to do this and have made it possible for us to do this going on 4 years now. And that is Clara Fernandez-Vara, who is the Associate Professor at NYU Game Center at Tisch School of the Arts. As well as D'Angela Duff, the co-director of Integrated Digital Media at NYU Tandon School of Engineering. And it's through the leadership and direction of people like that at NYU in both institutions and working collaboratively across institutions that really support the kind of programming you're going to see this weekend. And so it's my great pleasure to introduce D'Angela Duff.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your lives to get here. What's really amazing is we have people as far away as Montreal, Toronto, Brazil, Paraguay, Mexico, and last but not least, Australia. All right, so that's pretty amazing. So as Sarah said, my name is D'Angela Duff. I am one of the co-directors of the Integrated Digital Media Program, which is housed on this floor. The other co-director, his name is Luc Dubois, unfortunately could not be with us tonight, and he's very, very sad about it. So I wanted to make sure that you guys know that he wishes he could be here as well. So first of all, I'd like to start off by thanking our official sponsors, NYU's Game Center, as well as Integrated Digital Media at NYU's Tandon School of Engineering, the Office of Institute Diversity at Georgia Tech, and our corporate sponsor is MailChimp. So, to give you a little bit of history about Different Games actually started as Sarah's master's thesis project while she was a student in the Integrated Digital Media Program. And one thing I also like to say, some other notable alums from our program in the game space are our very own Kat Small, as well as Nina Freeman, who's not here with us, but our program, game is only a small aspect of our program. We do lots of different things. It's basically the intersection of design, art, and technology. We offer classes in augmented reality, motion capture, physical computing, and I could go on and on and on and on. So we have a very broad spectrum of courses. But I really want to talk about Magnet and how powerful Magnet is. So Magnet is the space that you're currently in, and that's an acronym because everybody and their mama loves acronyms. And Magnet stands for Media and Games Network. So all of the programs that are on the floor are related to media and games. So in addition to integrated digital media, we have an undergrad and grad program, BS and MS, and then the Game Center has a BFA and MFA in game design. There's also a master's program for games for learning, as well as digital media design for learning through NYU Steinhardt program. And then they also have a PhD in education communication technology. We have a couple of flavors of computer science on the floor. We have game engineering as well as the Courant's PhDs. And then we also have another program called CUSP. So what's really cool about Magnet is that it's the first inter-school facility at NYU, period. This is the only place on campus where there are multiple majors on the same floor cohabitating, which is really, really awesome for our students in particular, because students who are interested in games and within digital media can actually take classes in the Game Center as well as take advantage of the faculty advisors such as Clara on the floor. And so we actually call these open areas the beach, and that's basically where our students hang out so that they can get to know one another and look over one another's shoulders. So we're really proud of Magnet. This is actually our third year here in the space. It was originally gutted, and it's losing its brand new car smell, I must admit, but it's still pretty cool in my opinion. And I want to basically hand over the floor to Clara.
Hello. Ooh. Okay, can I? It's a bit low. Okay, hello everybody. How's everybody doing? Hey! Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming again to different games. Yes, kind of amazing. This is the fourth year that is running. I'm here on behalf of the NYU Game Center. I teach classes as faculty there. I teach game studies. I teach game narrative. That's kind of my thing. And I wanted to basically tell you, apart from co-sponsoring the event with IDM, the NYU Game Center also has a group of students. Half of the volunteers today come from our game design MFA, so thank you. Guys, you rock. And to the rest of the volunteers, also a round of applause because they're all awesome, because they're the ones that are making things happen. So the NYU Game Center is the game design department within the Tisch School of the Arts. We're not in engineering, we are an art school. So our department, as D'Angela said, we host an MFA in game design and a BFA this is the second year that is running. And we have a variety of courses that we teach, from the ones I teach to things like digital game design, to analog game design. We have a range, it's basically our thing, is what we focus on. As is the case with IDM, we like to support the community around New York City and beyond. We open our doors and we host at Magnet a variety of events such as the lecture series, Playtest Thursdays for those of you who are nearby. Every Thursday, 5 to 7, come play our games, not only the games for our students, you can come and bring your own games and play test them too and find people to play them. We also have done a couple of events in conjunction with the IGDA from New York City. Jess over there, hi. We're very happy to support the community. And being in an art school, for us, making games is not only an art, it's a cultural form. It is a means of expression. And we're always looking for ways to innovate, to push the borders, to expand what games can be, and also to go against the grain as much as we can. Our support from different games, however, doesn't just come from the difference, from just being contrarians. Different games means approaching games from new points of view as game makers, as game players, as game scholars. It's not only a matter of novelty either, but we also want to celebrate the diversity of these games because it goes beyond issues of gender, sexual orientation. We have factors of culture, socioeconomic class, age, ability, religion. All these are ways in which we can provide new points of view to look at games and kind of create and foster empathy, solidarity, and wisdom amongst game makers, players, and against scholars. Last year I had to say this, and it makes me kind of upset that I need to say this again, because some people that we're still talking about, in spite of everything, we are not here to destroy games. Our goal is quite the opposite. We want to encourage creation, invention, and expansion of games as a means of cultural expression. We think that everybody should be able to find a game for themselves, be it because it was made by somebody like them, or because they are willing to engage with experiences by people who are very unlike them and want to be challenged and go beyond their comfort zone. That means that when there's a trans character in your favorite role-playing game, or there are women working and having a creative voice in your favorite games, you embrace it. And you have to take on the challenge. Instead of throwing a tantrum and trying to get someone to lose their job, because the different approaches remind you that the world is still unfair and far from equal. So I know that most of you are here because you're willing to come to learn new things, to be challenged, and keep an open mind. So to all of you brave people, welcome to Different Games.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of housekeeping to do. I want to welcome the folks that are handling our inclusivity statement as well as our code of conduct up to walk you through that for tonight and for tomorrow.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle.
And I'm Michael De Anda. We're the Different Games collective members responsible for the inclusivity and diversity in these spaces.
This year, we created the Code of Conduct to go alongside the inclusivity statement, which will outline the expected behavior in the space.
And this is to ensure that everyone has a safer space in Different Games and is able to engage and participate in the conference.
So we're going to read out loud a portion of the Code of Conduct, and it's found on our website and in a couple of the signs around the space. I will do my best to recognize that this is a learning space for every participant.
I will give myself and those around me the space to learn.
I will address each individual by their pronouns.
I will ask before I take photos.
I will respect the wishes of people who do not want to be photographed or appear in photos.
I will listen to others with the intent of letting them share their perspectives and not interrupt my fellow Different Games participants.
I will remain respectful when called out.
I will not harass anyone.
If I am in conflict with someone, I will attempt to resolve the conflict peacefully.
I will not use homophobic, cissexist, sexist, racist, ableist, or classist language.
I acknowledge that I represent Different Games to the community hosting the conference, and my behavior reflects upon Different Games conference as a whole. I agree to hold myself accountable for my actions and speech. In addition, we have some color-coded lanyards. A regular attendee has a black lanyard. A volunteer or Different Games staff member has a blue lanyard. And someone who does not wish to be photographed has a yellow lanyard. Your official Different Games 2016 safety and security point people are me, Dee, Mike, and Maddie. Yeah! So if you ever find yourself in conflict or feel unsafe, please grab one of the three of us. Or if you have any questions on safety and security, we'll always be around and available.
And we want to make a special announcement that the bathrooms on this level are all gendered bathrooms.
Another special announcement about photography. We have 2 official photographers this year, Emmy and Ashley. Wave your hand. If an individual prefers to not be photographed, everyone is asked to respect that person's wishes. And if an individual who does not want to be photographed should feel free to tell the photographers that they don't want to be photographed or wear a yellow lanyard.
We hope you have a very enjoyable Different Games 2016 conference.
Thank you, Mike and Dee, for that. One other thing, and I feel like this kind of goes without saying, but it's never bad to overstate these things, is we're going to be talking a lot of controversial topics while we're here. And while social media is an important component to how we experience these spaces together, particularly for the fact that this is live streaming right now. All of our tracks will be live streaming this weekend. So that's really important to us because of accessibility. That allows us to share this space with people who can't physically be present because of economic barriers or because of ability barriers. So that's really important to us. But it's important that when we extend what we're doing here out into social media, we be conscious about how we're tagging people. So if everybody could refrain from tagging anything that has to do with Gamergate or any harassment campaigns with the different games hashtag or any of the people who are participating with that hashtag, even if that happens to be the topic of what we're talking about, if we could refrain from bringing that hashtag in just for everyone's safety. We'll be moderating social media, as is our work that we do every year, as well as the Twitch stream, and we have great people working on that. So I hope everybody has a safe and enjoyable time with regards to social media, but definitely grab one of the volunteers if you have any questions about that, in addition to the experience you're having in the space. So definitely keep that in mind. Okay, so I actually am about to moving into our keynote speakers for this evening. And I want to say that one of the things that's so amazing about working on different games and getting to be here with you guys tonight and getting to be part of the process of organizing this conference with so many great designers and thinkers and critics is that there's so many people that I respect as peers and look up to, as well as people that I've been following their work for years and just amazed by it. Looking out in the audience, I'm seeing Celia Pierce right now. I just introduced D'Angela and Clara. It's wonderful to get to work with people like this. Maddie Bryce is in the back. All of the game designers that are here sharing their work. Kat Small is here. So many people who it's just a joy to be around. And that is exactly what I would say about Suzanne and Jen, who are here to speak with you tonight and to share their speech on gender in video games, past, present, and future possibilities. To tell you a little bit about them, Jen Jensen is a professor of pedagogy and technology in the Faculty of Education at York University, and she's written about and designed games for almost 20 years, always in collaboration with fabulous folks. Some of her most recent work has been putting game design technologies in the hands of kids, helping them to make games, and especially supporting the technological endeavors of girls and women. She's currently the principal investigator for a really important initiative of the Canadian government, which has funded a partnership grant on refiguring innovation in games. You can find out more information about that at www.refig.ca. Lots of people here have her to thank for that wonderful initiative and the work that she's doing, as well as Suzanne de Castells, who has written on literacy, schooling, and epistemology, as well as queer theory and digital games, among many other things. Her current work explores whether and how people learn when playing commercial off-the-shelf games, including how 3D games can positively impact spatial reasoning. In addition, she's designed games for learning, including one that focused on health crises brought about during an epidemic called Contagion. It's with that, I want to welcome Suzanne and Jen up here to present. Thank you.
All right, woo, here we go. And thanks, Sarah. That was a fabulous introduction. So that we can catch us back up on timing, we're going to try to speed through this a little bit more. We'll try not to go too over. What we're going to do tonight is show you some stuff that you might know, some stuff that you definitely know, and try to show you some provocations that we hope help shape what's going on. We're actually not going to talk much about our own research, but in the spirit of the Keynote genre, we're going to try to challenge and energize and catalyze thought and discussion at this conference, hopefully. And what we're trying to do is build in provocations for history, gender, and video games for each. And then in response to these provocations, what we felt was our need to build a cross-sectoral feminist alliance that hopefully can help be transformative in the field. And we're going to do this by way of a little detour that I'll alert you to about free speech. So over to Suzanne.
And we're going to swing the microphone back and forth as instructed. Okay, so the first thing is history and what? History? So I know that probably for a lot of people, they wonder, like, who really cares what happened way back when? So I'm just going to start by saying why you might want to care about that. First of all, history is how we understand, and I would argue how we misunderstand the present. Most of humanity has been left out of it. Now, you all know this, but I'm just reminding you that, you know, women, differently abled, people of color, the oppressed, most people don't feature in history. And so part of that means that we need to get over it and to understand that history is something made, not found. And I just really want to stress the making part. So understanding history is really how we make our future. First up, provocation, and actually, that's my cat. And he's roaring upside down, and I don't quite know why he's there, but I think he's quite cute, and you know, you gotta have a cat. Okay, so first point is history has a history, and we forget that. So, with apologies to all the historians here, because they already know all of this, I just want to open with 5 points about history. It's not new. It's by no means a straightforward concept. It's one that many people have done enormous amounts of work on for quite literally ages. Relatively late in the history of history, actually in 1975, before probably anyone here except me was born, a feminist Marxist historian, Sheila Rowbotham, wrote a really very now classic work, largely forgotten, called Hidden from History. 300 years of oppression, eyesight, and the fight against it. And as we will show, that tradition of oppression is really older, a lot older than 300 years, and has a lot to say to us today. History is what Raymond Williams, another dead white dude academic from Cambridge, called a selective tradition, which leaves out more than it documents. So it needs to be studied accordingly for what it does not say more than for what it does say. And the risky business of working from any historical foundation, as Foucault has repeatedly insisted even after he was dead, is that history naturalizes what is partial, contingent, and could easily have been otherwise, reifying power as if it were some species of the essential nature of things. Second, the distinction that we need to make between history and historiography, the writing of history, which Rowbotham and other feminist historians make clear has managed to leave out almost everybody and drown them in history's mainstream. And because history's created and not discovered, we need to be asking, instead of what actually happened, how and why it is that this, whatever it is the history that we're making or reading or telling. We need, in other words, an archaeology, in Foucault's terms, in a way, more than we need a history of video games. So third point, I can't count, histories versus chronicles. So this is a critical distinction between chronicles and histories. Chronicles document events in a series, or in the case of women and children, other people don't document events in a series on a static kind of linear timeline. Histories are narratives. There are stories that interlink and explain the events in that chronicle. So the next question has to be, that has to always be asked, is what kind of a story does this given history tell? What kinds of stories have video game histories been telling us? And how might we tell different stories, and how might we tell those stories differently? So I just want to stress, and all the narrative people know this, storytelling is no simple matter. This is just a tiny little fragment of some theoretical work which will bore you to death, but it's actually really brilliant, that really complicates notions of stories being simple things. And this is from Hayden White, yes, another dead white dude, but this time from Cornell, I believe. 1973, he wrote a book called Meta-History, and it's actually superlatively brilliant. It's work on historiography that identifies 4 main ways of storytelling the past: romance, with its mythic gods and heroes and great men; comedy, tragedy, satire. So what kinds of stories are we making of video game history? Mostly the history of video games is the first kind. It's imploded as the romantic tale of God's heroes and great men. It's worth recognizing that historical accounts, like other kinds of accounts, are all imbricated with power, as Marx told us so long ago, or as Tolstoy told us even earlier, great men are great, not because they were great individuals, but because they were individuals who were powerfully propped up at the expense of others, hidden from history, in Rowbotham's words. So in video game studies, we have plenty of chronicles and quite a few ontologies, but we actually have very little historical scholarship. Those few historical studies that we do have exhibit scarcely any engagement with or understanding of history as a well-developed discipline that's evolved over centuries, and opt instead for a kind of naive conception of history as the true story of what actually happened, ignoring, overlooking, or perhaps even just not even knowing about the theoretical sophistication of the discipline of history. And I know this sounds really, old school, but I think this is really important for us to understand. Yes, because this kind of naive approach really kind of too often typifies video game theory, research, and scholarship across the board, as we're going to try to show in a couple of other cases. And that was all well and good in the early days of video game studies. We had emerging scholars, young people without strong, academic backgrounds, because this was an emerging field. It didn't have any history, didn't have any canonical works. But by this point, I think, we can and should expect a lot more historical sophistication than we are really mostly seeing. And the sobering truth is that far from being leading edge work, video game studies is now, I think, lagging behind many other very traditional disciplines. And what we've become accustomed to is a kind of naive storytelling that doesn't even know that it's telling stories, and stories that are conveniently self-serving fictions at that. So, what do we need? We need to reclaim a history in which women and others are present and know that and how they've been erased, elided, forgotten, or overlooked. So on to the fifth point, which is basically that we need, and that critical feminist work gives us, powerful tools to build new historical practices and better historical theories. We were at a recent conference, not that recent now, a few months back. One of the plenary speakers spoke of how hard it is to recover the traces of women whose work in our field has been hidden from our own history. And examples that she gave was looking back in the archives and finding shadows of women's hands on Xerox documents, or old and thrown out meeting notes that really suggest, if you read them, that women who were characterized as secretaries might actually have been the people making the path-breaking executive decisions. She also urged that as important as the work of the reclamation of the historical foremothers, as it were, is, the more important task actually is to identify the women working in the present, and women and others. I want to stress, when we talk about women, which we normally do because our field is gender studies, we mean sort of genre, we mean difference. So, as much as that's important, we really need to recover some understanding of the women who are presently working and the people who are presently working in this field. And what do I want to say about that? Not a lot. I think I'm good.
All right. Okay, so moving now to gender, and just 5 provocations and things that you will know but are worth repeating. So number 1, gender equals sex, and we get to count it, and it's only 2, M or F. And we've been doing this counting exercise for a very long time, and by we I mean the people who are doing the studies that get rolled up to the industry, mostly, but also the game industry as well. We're not doing a great job of breaking this binary. All we have to do is look at, a lot of the ways in which our games are organized to see that. But we had the same counting exercise almost 10 years ago, and it didn't really look that different. Come on. So we need to also get away from this kind of naive notion that it's getting better, that somehow things are progressing. They're not really progressing. Women and others have always been playing games. We're just not doing the research to study how that happens and in what forms. There's also obviously this kind of crude gender binary that shows up here, but it shows up other places. And it is one of the things that is unproblematic also in literature that is ongoing in the area of gender in video games. So studying gender also equals a lot of times studying girls and women. While there is really great rolling up work on masculinities that's happening, it's still the case that when you read gender, it 9 times out of 10 means that you're talking about girls and women. So we need to break this stuff up, these hegemonies, and this is just one of them. So this is another example. Guess what? They wanted to find gender difference, and they did. They studied German women, but I could show you American women or Canadian women, and they found, wow, that we just want social interactions as women, and that we don't like violent content. They've been finding this for 20 years, and if you ask the right questions, you'll find it every time. So we are actually using old tools to ask these questions, and as I think Raywin Connell puts it really, really well, and it'll be hard to see at the back, and I'll read it. The main finding about 80 years of research is a massive psychological similarity between these two binary sexes, women and men, in the population studied by psychologists. If it were not for the cultural bias of both writers and readers, we might long ago have been thinking about this as sex similarity research, not sex different or gender difference research. So we've got to break this up. We have to actually create conditions where we can be surprised by our research. One of the ways that we do this is to create new conditions in our work. We often work with kids who are between 10 and 12 years old, and we bracket off those girls from their male counterparts and give them unfettered hands-on access to games and tools, thereby allowing for conditions that do not always already privilege male power, status, and technological know-how, whether this is real or imagined, and some of this is just imagined. So, related to the Germans and choice, and structural choice, when we ask people to choose things, and especially women and others, choice might just mean no choice. You can't go there. And this is a really great thing. The real reason is that most women clearly aren't as interested in technologically related work as men are. It's a choice. That's the kind of discourse that circulates around choice. And choice is always already heteronormative. The default choice in all schools, as we know, is heteronormative. So, a fourth provocation, gender, as we all are struggling with to know, is a performance that is not only contingently related to sex, contingently related to sex. And while there is some work happening that explores some of those edges, including right here, that we're going to find out about over the next 2 days, we need much more of this kind of work. We need to examine masculinities and femininities that are non-gender conformist, and that means steering away in some cases from what's hot to really what for many people is not. It's hard to get things funded. Some of these things are never going to have money behind them. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing them. Sedgwick goes even further and challenges us to no longer presume a relationship between masculinity and men and femininity and women, even if it's difficult not to. And Suzanne would, and I would add, what is to be done if there is no definition of masculinity or femininity that is not always already hegemonic? So, like historical studies, gender studies, feminist studies has made enormous strides over the long last while, and we've done this, I think, through intersectionality. This has been the big toolkit where we can look at multiple oppressions at once, and we can see the ways in which those oppressions intersect. so that we're not isolating one factor. And it's a very useful theoretical standpoint, but also a very useful methodological standpoint. Video game studies, including many of my great colleagues, have managed to preserve the notion that gender equals sex. There's just two of them. They can be counted, and everyone just has one each. And here again, I think critical feminist and gender theory has much to offer digital game studies. And it's really time for us to start listening.
So a few things you already know about video games, but they're worth always noticing. And the first one is that there's more than one origin story, and if you really look back, you'll probably remember some of these photographs, or at least maybe your parents will. But I mean, the first advertising figure was a girl, and then it went on to couples and happy children and families. So that's where we came from. That's what it was supposed to be. But guess what? In the mid-'80s, suddenly it's all about the boys. If you decontextualize that, as we so often do in our field, because I think we're trying so hard to be a field that we sort of sometimes don't look more widely and we think everything happened in video games. We forget that the mid-'80s, that's the dot-com period, that's the influx of money and opportunity into tech fields, which were completely male-dominated. So it was basically the resurgence of patriarchy in the mid-'80s. And that's why we got the almighty joystick and those kinds of images. You need to know these things, right? You needed to know that. and with that, yeah, and with that, of course, comes racism. Dr. Mario's Witch Doctor. Like, do we want to play this game? No. Or advertising for the new PSP a while back. Again, white coming. This is just. So these are the kinds of things that that we need to really understand didn't need to happen. History could have been very, very different. And there are very big reasons that are quite outside of video games per se that explain why those things happen. But obviously video games are much more than WoW and League of Legends and Call of Duty. And as many people have pointed out, it just, again, bears really paying attention to. Play doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. And we know almost nothing about what play means to most of the people who play. And that's the same point about history. Whose play are we looking at? The play of very small groups of people, a certain kind of play. We need to begin to examine and explicate our understandings of non-canonical conceptions and practices and purposes of play. And here, I just flag as one example the game That Dragon Cancer. The purposes for play, the experience of play, the kind of game, who plays, that's a whole other thing, and we're not paying attention to that broad spectrum. We're studying very few games, and we really haven't studied in depth enough the kinds of games and play that most people are doing. So what we don't need is more of this, and we don't need more of this. And what we do need, of course, workplace policies and practices that enable difference. And this just list is from a blog post by a black female Google worker, which was then recycled by a female developer, Lara Lynn Williams, in Gamasutra, under the title, We're Not Pegs. Hard to remember sometimes under the working conditions that many people have to enjoy, that you're not pegs. Okay, next, finally, what we need again in video game studies, as well as in history, as well as in gender studies, new theories, new practices. Diversity drives innovation in other industries. It's very well understood. It affects the bottom line. More diversity, more innovation, more profits. I'm not particularly keen on the profits part, but this is something we all know. So we have to take this very seriously in cultivating diversity, which is why this conference is so important. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So the trouble is with all of this and with difference is that we're not so great at reading it. We like, and so we seek out that wherever and whenever possible to interrupt that tendency and to tamper down our impulses to read difference as a threat. We also have to take chances. We have to hire differently. We have to think about difference differently, very much like what's going to happen over the next 2 days. This goes well beyond the add women and stir stuff that happens, the impulse to get to 50 and 50, the kind of equality thing that, oh, if I just put a person of color on my panel, that's check, I got that covered. There's a lot of stuff that happens in trying to get this stuff together, and I'm going to ask you not to take a picture of the next slide, please. So what's been happening is, and a lot of this has been happening around Gamergate, and this is our shift to this is our segue to free speech, and then we'll come back, is that and this is the only time I'm going to say Gamergate really, is that in recounting the individual cases, and there are many of these of harassment, we need to understand and to demonstrate how these individual cases, too easily dismissed as such, are epiphenomenal to a larger structural issue that enfranchises this male stream of gamers and others to denigrate and abuse those who dare to play, and worse yet, to make video games. So the problem with this is that the typicality of these cases and the folks who represent them, the women behind the online persona, are typically heterosexual, many are attractive, photogenic young women, characteristics that hardly position them outside mainstream gender norms. So indeed, it is important precisely the gender typicality of these cases that will spark and fuel the disciplinary engines of normalized misogyny. So it's because they look like real women, they should act like real women, not the other way around. So that's where we're getting a lot of this interesting line. And what is correlatively significant about Gamergate and other harassment then is that it underscores the ways in which the state does little or nothing to put a stop to death and rape threats and hate and maligning speech.
I keep wanting to add more to yours, but I won't because time. Okay, so really important. No speech is free. No speech is free. Part of the discourse that's being mobilized to oppose blocking hate speech at the systems level is that move violates freedom of speech legislation in the U.S. Constitution Human Rights Amendment that's cited almost as frequently as the right to bear arms, even in the face of massive innocent lives lost to that freedom. What is continuously misapprehended about this endlessly fictionalized human right to free speech is that speech is and always has been subject to limitations. It's not within one's right to verbally harm someone, for example, through slander or libel or hate speech. Why do I get all the dead white dudes? John Stuart Mill, 1859. I mean, you need to know this. Argued strongly against the suppression of opinion in his big book on liberty, and the presumption that opinions were to be publicly aired. His presumption was opinions were to be publicly aired so that they could be debated. That was central to his thinking on free speech. His primary concern was about an individual's right to speak back to power, not to have opinions suppressed. And this is really different from someone claiming their right to salacious and vitriolic hate speech directed against people structurally subordinated in positions of lesser power to the speaker.
So Mills shared the presumption of his era that speaker and addressee were co-located in space and time, that the interlocutors shared a regional context, that they, in effect, knew one another, and that in this co-inhabitation, they publicly stood by their opinions. That is precisely what is not the case with online harassment, as we all know. Typically, the most crass and sexualized comments are posted anonymously and through fake email, Twitter accounts, etc.
Are we here? Oh, I get this one. Okay, I love this one. So to be very clear, nowhere in the principle of free speech is it within one's right to slander or malign publicly and without proof another person, nor is it an exercise of free speech to make threatening phone calls, hack websites, threaten to kill people, rape people. None of these things are defensible by the principle of freedom of speech. In fact, the opposite, they're prohibited by it. And we just think it's really important to remember that and to keep telling people that.
So this is our segue back from the free speech and into our intervention that we've been working on for the last 8 years. So we started here, Feminists in Games. It started 8 years ago over a cocktail and turned into a lot of work. What we did with the Feminists in Games is we pitched a project with feminism in the title to the Canadian government. And we said, look, this is pre-Gamergate, and we said, look, this is, we gotta stop this. And this is a really sort of sore part of the tech industry. We thought the tech industry was bad. This looks really gross. And this is 7 years ago. And the Canadian government said, sure, we'll fund you with feminism in the title. Yeah. And so we got a kind of smaller grant from them called the Partnership Development Grant. And we brought people to Toronto, and there are a number of them in this audience. Yay. And we said, pitch stuff to us that you can't fund or you couldn't fund another way, and we'll try to fund you. And that's exactly what we did. Some of those figlets that went out into the world are still figleting away, doing their own thing. We kind of continued on. One of the things that we really wanted to do, and what wasn't clear at that first meeting, was what the fuck do we do with feminism? Because it's not, I mean, Bell Hooks is great, and she's got a great book, and it was in 2000 that she said it was for everyone. But people don't feel that way. And other feminists, we've had good wars along the way. But one thing about feminism is it actually has learned from its mistakes, has listened to the queer theorists, has listened to trans and other scholars, and it continues to work on it. So what I really like, and I'm going to give you a little quote from Hooks, and this is in 2000, remember, but I think we could do this today. Feminist politics is losing momentum, and I think we're kind of gaining it, but in a little different way. And what she says is that feminism has definitions. We need to reclaim them. We need to share them. We need to start over. Let's have t-shirts, bumper stickers, postcards, hip-hop music, television, radio commercial, ads, billboards, games, all manner of printed material that tells the world about feminism. We can share the simple yet powerful message that feminism is a movement to end sexist, and I would put now in brackets because we've learned shit, other forms of oppression. Let's start there. So we really, in our second kick at our can with the workshop, brought folks back to report on what they'd done. We had new folks come in and talk to us. We ended up with an amazingly diverse and really interesting audience. And we had the precursor of Gamergate, the famous Saragon, who called us the feminist circle jerk. I still don't really know what that means or looks like, but it could be sexy. So, as Sarah said in her very lovely introduction, we took that work and we made it into something else. We now have 5 years of funding from the Canadian government. We have partners across Canada, in the United States, and in the UK who are working at these intersections, hopefully they'll come up, to do work on 4 areas. The games industry writ large, that means indie and other and different games, as well as the, people who still can't get their shit together, like Xbox. It means informal learning, where there are a number of people here who have put on programs, but who will put on programs that's in informal contexts. Games and culture, that's writ large, player studies, game analysis, etc. And then formal education, because that's really where we are all sitting right now, and we have a problem. My panelists later, Emily Flynn-Jones and Stephanie Fisher, are going to talk to that problem just right after this talk. So,
back to the old people. Okay.
We're almost done.
So looking back to look forward, by getting to a conclusion, we will move back to history. This is Mary Beard. She's a classics professor at the University of Cambridge. Cambridge is very well represented at this evening's talk, so yay, Cambridge. So she's had much coverage of a lecture she gave at the British Museum called "Oh, Do Shut Up, Dear," about the long history of violently silencing women that's documented since the days of the ancients. Who knew? She explains that very near the beginning of the tradition of Western literature, this is a long time ago, it's like before 1950, we find the first recorded example of a man telling a woman to shut up, that her voice was not to be heard in public, that only men had the right of public speech, and that she who dared to violate that speech right would be silenced by rape, by murder, and we haven't had this one yet, but by having her tongue cut out. She focuses first on a moment immortalized at the start of the Odyssey. You've all read that, right? You've all read the Odyssey, right? Goes with the Iliad, yeah. In which young Telemachus disciplines his mother Penelope, who dares to speak in public. Mother, he says, go back into your quarters and take up your own work, the loom and the distaff. And so reminds me of go back to the kitchen and make me a sandwich. Speech will be the business of men, all men, and me most of all, for mine is the power in this household. In fact, as Mary Beard puts it, and she studied contemporary issues of this kind that we're engaged in, we won't say the word, the more I've looked at the details of the threats and the insults that women are on the receiving end of, and the more some of them seem to fit into the very old patterns of prejudice and assumptions that I've been talking about. That's in her lecture on the classics. It doesn't much matter what line of argument you take as a woman. If you venture into traditional male territory, the abuse comes anyway. It isn't what you say that prompts it. It's the fact that you are saying it. Is this me?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, the challenge that we face as feminist activists, community organizers, game of conferences, game jams, makers of games, and so on, is telling stories of women who do not fit the established gender scripts. In some sense, we haven't yet accomplished that ourselves. The women who are at the center of the stories, we said, are often more heteronormative than not. As Butler points out, they're notable precisely because they're already counting as noteworthy subjects. They're recognizable as female, whether or not they necessarily comply with gender norms. Nothing new here. So no real gender trouble to speak of, because the only ways non-normative genders put in an appearance is in the form of abuse. If real non-normative people dare to speak out, they actually belong in the back room, outside the frame, in the spectral realm of the immaterial, those unworthy even to assume the position of women. So we don't even get that far.
So this is just going to talk a little bit by way of conclusion to talk about as we have said and can't say enough, the women who are at the receiving end of the most media attention aren't the ones who are on the far side of established modes of intelligibility, nor do their individual subjectivities, their embodied personalities, challenge openly or otherwise established gender stereotypes. That work is going on elsewhere, and it certainly doesn't get the coverage that some other folks do. However, but as illegitimated speaking subjects who know their own history, they might just be able to deploy that agency to open up the misogynistic world of games, gamers, etc. And from that enfranchised speaking position, they just might have, as others less centrally located have not now nor ever had, the power to speak and act against the masculinist status quo. So here's the takeaway. What's new here is there's nothing new. In fact, what matters most in the deployment of tropes of surprise, dismay, shock, and awe in Gamergate is that it makes it look like this hasn't always happened and that something new and really different is going on. The real shock should be that it is the same old, and we need to name that significant fact. To borrow from the law of the conservation of matter, violence against women is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes its shape. violently silencing women, others, whether in the Odyssey or in Call of Duty or on Twitter, is as old as the hills. So to end this talk with bell hooks, quote, "We must courageously learn from the past and work for a future where feminist principles will undergird every aspect of our public and private lives. Feminist politics aims to end domination, to be who we are, to live lives where we love justice, where we can live in peace. Feminism is for everybody, including each and every one of you in this audience." Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Jen Jensen and Suzanne DeCastells. I think we have time for a couple questions. So sorry to send you packing. Yeah, I think we have time for a couple questions from the audience. So I'd love to hear if folks have things that are coming to mind for them. Yeah, I think that's a lot to respond to. But yes, Maddie, you'll have to project and we'll back.
First, I just think that's such an important point. I do want to stress, in the 4 sectors that we're looking at, probably the most important for us is informal learning. That's where we are doing community outreach programs. We just finished a little program on a little remote island called Galliano in BC with 9 young women who really, I mean, they identify as women, and that's all we asked for. But we had people who live on the street. We have people who are in incredibly difficult situations of poverty and other things. And we put them up for 4 days, and we fed them, and we gave them instruction, and they learned how to make games and how to think about games, and they're blogging about games. And I think that the non-formal sector is really a critical area of work in this otherwise academic project. And what we're just delighted about is that we've managed to take areas that are really kind of underfunded and not enough attention paid to them, and managed to get the resources in the name of feminism, for God's sake, whoever thought that, and actually start providing for those sectors to build, because that is where the change is. That is the leading edge, I think. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, and I just want to say the other thing that we're really trying to do is pull people in who who don't necessarily have the institutional foothold, and actually hear from those folks. So how many in this audience have heard of First Person Scholar? Okay, so they're one of our partners. They're one of the outlets for the kind of stuff that we're trying to do. They're basically always at the table with the things that we're trying to roll out. So we're trying to do it. We could do it better. We're always open for suggestions, and I'm going to come talk to you. But I agree, and I think that we also have to think about how, for example, making sure the person who's running FPS is actually paid, and she hasn't been. We just found out. So those are the kinds of things that sort of get left to the side, but start crawling out from underneath, the whatever proverbial bed once you have something like this. So we would like to hear from more people about ideas about that. So thanks, it was really a good question. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Good.
Thank you.
So I'm actually going to send everybody off to our first session of the conference. We're going to have 3 3 simultaneous sessions this evening. In room 845, we'll be having a participatory game design workshop. And so that is over this way. Yes, that's the big fishbowl room over here, right? In this main space here, we'll be hearing more from Jen and Suzanne, as well as other folks that are here representing their projects about game studies curriculum and various ways that it intersects with some of the issues that we've talked about. So that'll be in this main space. And in room 811, we'll have our first affective play track offering, which is a workshop with Squinky, who'll be presenting their game, Coffee and Misunderstanding. So if you haven't played that game before, it's an opportunity to do that, as well as a chance to check out the games that are around in the main space here. After we finish that programming at 8 o'clock, we'll be opening up the food and the bar in this area, so if you want to come back and kind of mingle. So please check out the workshops. I'll give you a few minutes, and we'll plan on getting started at about quarter after, so a couple minutes to get settled in either room 845 for participatory game design, the game studies curriculum workshop in this space, or the affective play workshop with Squinky in room 811. And then from 8 to 9, we'll have some drinks and some snacks and play more arcade games. So thank you, everyone. Oh, and if you want to tweet at our hashtag, it's Different Games 2016. So thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Jen and Suzanne.